Sunrise Fitness. Brought to you by Your Plate and Nature Valley.
Jamaica, make we do the right thing. Make we live good today for a better tomorrow. Talk it out. Don't fight it out. The time by the Ministry of National Security is
6:30.
The Court of Appeal has issued a landmark ruling insofar as the wearing of dreadlocks by children in schools is concerned. And now the managers of schools, the CEOs, i.e. principals, are scratching their heads to see how they can formulate policies, set rules and regulations to be in sync with this ruling by the Court of Appeal. The Education Minister, Favour Williams, comes into the studio to discuss this issue along with talking about the ministry's capacity to settle the big burial bill that's approaching $3 billion. That's a discussion, well, those two issues up for treatment on Lead Story this evening right here on CVM TV. Yes, welcome back to Lead Story. Welcome to Lead Story on CVM TV. My name is George Davis. So caught between two things just at the very top. The burial bill, the post-burial recovery, very important, of extreme importance. But in the week when we're counting the cost of burial, came this decision from the Court of Appeal that the Kensington primary school student who was told that she had to cut her locks before she could take up a place at the institution, the Court of Appeal overturning what the Supreme Court set down, saying that children who wear dreadlocks hairstyles are entitled to a place at schools and should not be barred on that ground, especially where the matter of the grooming of the hair is not an issue for the school authorities to set that child aside. We're going to come to that along with this issue, of course, of how much the Ministry of Education is facing in terms of spending to repair the damage done by a burial in time for the start of the new school year in September. So let's go to the streets, though, because we did prepare a Vox Pop for you, asking people for their perspective on this ruling by the Court of Appeal in the issue concerning a child known by the initials ZV. Child, of course, is a minor, so can't be named. The parents who went to court to fight for her right to wear her hairstyle of choice to a primary school.
I believe that everyone should have a right to an education. Whatever their religion, whatever their faith, whatever their nationality, they should have the right to education. If not, somebody's at fault.
Yeah, in my opinion, well, if me did have locks, I feel so because I don't really want to cut my locks because I love it. Part of my life, you know. Everybody have a life to live. You know? Yeah, and really things for them should have just allow it. No, I really do not think there should be an issue with a child wearing locks to school because when you really check it out, it's not really the locks is learning, it's the brain. So I think all they need to do, catch up their hair properly and attire their uniform properly and just get some education in their head. That's it.
Yeah, it's good. It's good because suppose there's a Rasta and it's your religion. They're supposed to force you to trim your hair. But your hair not going to do with you learning in school.
Locks, I don't have a problem with it being worn in the schools now. What is key and important is the students' attitude and their reason for being at school. Has nothing to do as well. I'm taking it from a biblical perspective. Come as you are, as long as you come and you're there with a mindset for school. That is what is most important.
Nothing is wrong with wearing the locks. That is perfect. The child has to go to school, whether it's dreadlocks or ballet.
I think the hair had nothing to do with the education. Absolutely nothing. So whether it's a real Rasta or not, go ahead, go to school and do good.
Kensington Primary, for the record, one of the most highly sought after primary institutions in Jamaica. Outstanding results they produce at the exit exams level, and the quality of education, the all-around quality of education of the highest standard. And so a place there is highly sought after, and it's a very competitive process to get your child in. Now, when your child is told that, yeah, she can't take up this place because she wears locks, you know, it's going to be a body blow for the parents, and the parents dug in. And when we spoke to the father, Dale Virgo, here, he said, perhaps if the reason advanced by the school of the fact of the locks likely to be junjoed, i.e. fungus, or a host for lice or louse in this instance, he wouldn't have gone all the way of going to the court. He may have just moved his daughter somewhere else, but the insult of being told that the child's hair may carry lice or junjo was too much for him to bear, and that's why he went to court to fight for his daughter. The Education Minister is with me now. Minister Williams, good evening. Welcome to Lead Story.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Good. This ruling means what now in terms of the ministry's communication to schools about hairstyle policy going forward?
Okay, well, first let me say it's a welcome ruling. It clarifies for us in the education sector what we have been trying to communicate about dress and grooming in schools. If you recall, some time ago, I had made the announcement that no child wearing locks should be required to cover his or her hair.
Yes.
I think that's an insult to the child. You're sending a very wrong message that somehow the quality of your hair is such that it can't be seen. You have to cover it up. So this takes it even a step further. We've always said no child should be denied education. We note this practice in the education sector, and every time it comes to my attention, I'm on the phone with the principal to find out what's the reason you cannot lock out a child. There has to be other ways that you have to find to deal with the particular situation at hand. And in the case of hair, again, like I said, the ruling provides some really good backing for us.
And that's a point I want to pick up, because here's the thing. As you've correctly said, even in your time now as minister, I've seen you issue releases talking about the fact of hair and hairstyle not being a prohibitive point for a child attending school. But it does seem as if that advice was more like a recommendation or a suggestion, not like the edict that one would have liked to see come from the ministry. The fact of the Court of Appeals ruling, now, will you now be setting down as edict the rule that hairstyles which are locks, whether for Rastafari purposes, whether because the child and the parents are Rastafari, or just because of personal style, will this now be an edict sent out by the ministry to schools to say, do not bar a child on this ground?
That and other styles will be sent out. Obviously, in a school setting, especially in a high school where you have 1,500, 1,200 or whatever children, you have to have rules in the school, right? We're saying by issuing our guidelines in terms of dress and grooming, we've given the broad contours to our schools to say, for your particular dress and grooming policy, here are certain guidelines. So when we look at your policy, it has to meet those guidelines. It can't be discriminatory. There are a number of different areas in it that we're going to do the test by to say it's not in compliance or conformity with the framework as provided by the ministry. In no case do we want to see our principals lock out or deny our students.
But here we go, Minister, because there are some principals who've been in situ for many, many years, decades at the helm of the school, who will say, well, how can they stay at Heroes Circle and legislate what my grooming policy is? I know best, and I'm saying that no child with whether locks or star drawn in their head, because I'm sure the other side of the equation will now come into play. People say, well, if a child can go to school with a lock hairstyle because it's their way of expressing themselves and the way their parents are comfortable seeing them express themselves, why can't I draw the map of Jamaica in the back of my son's head, or an emblem in the side on the side of my son's head? How can the ministry then say that I can't do that? So you're going to have all of these challenges to grapple with. So let's start with the first one. How do you prevent the principals who will say that, notwithstanding the court ruling, they believe that locks have no place in school?
You have a court ruling, right? It is, we have to respect the court ruling. It's a court of appeal. We operate under law and order. As a school, you're bound by the Education Act, the education regulation. As a country, we're bound by other rules. We're not a lawless society. We're a society of laws and rules. And we know within our hearts of hearts that we have to abide by rules in the society, or we risk chaos in the society. Similarly, in a school, which is a microcosm of society, there have to be rules. Rules have to be agreed by the various stakeholders, and we going to implore parents that once you've gone through this process with the school and you agree on certain things, then you should abide by those rules.
But there's a loophole everywhere, and I can imagine some principals saying to you, well, Parliament didn't pass this as a piece of legislation. There was no bill brought to the Parliament to this effect. What happened is that the Court of Appeal ruled in this instance, in this specific case, it ruled this way. Therefore, I'm not bound by any law to abide by what the Court of Appeal sets down, and I'm going to continue what I've been doing previously by saying no locks on any child that is admitted to my school. What would
it
you
will
do
be
then?
Incorporated in our dress and grooming policy that has been making the rounds, and we're at the point of finalization of that. In it already, we have quite a bit in there talking about your natural hair. We're Jamaicans of African descent. Our hair is a certain texture and so on, and that we ought to respect that, and it's going to take some education.
And you're saying, though, that this will be written in black and white in the grooming policy that all schools will be required to follow to the T.
We are going to ensure that that is there in the dress and grooming policy.
Take up the other side now. The parent who now says, well, if they can wear locks to school, I can draw designs in my son's hair or my son's head. How does the ministry deal with that? And you have to be prepared for that, because as night follows day, you and I know that's likely to happen.
George, I know we're going to get these variations that we have to work through at the school level. Again, we're imploring parents to, not take the kind of wide view of this, because remember, you're in an institution that has to operate by rules, or there will be chaos in the school. So we're asking parents to work with the board, the principals, the teachers in the school, consult, talk, come to an agreement on, what it is that everybody can abide by in that school.
Well, let me provoke you with this question then. Why not just open it up to whatever goes? And here's what I mean. For years, I commentated on and watched several editions of the secondary schools football league in Trinidad and Tobago. So the big schools, the Presentation College, Queen's Royal College, Signal Hill, you name them. All of these, when I see these schoolboys come out on the football field, Minister, with some hairstyles that you're saying, it's a schoolboy with color in their hair, plaits in 10 different directions, all kinds of things, and it's accepted in TNT, an Afrocentric society like ours, and very similar to us in many ways. They just have whatever goes policy it may seem. Are we trending towards that, or do we still maintain some of the grip that we have on what we call proper grooming?
That's a great question. I don't believe our society is there yet, where Trinidad is. And in fact, in listening to your vox pop, if that's what you call it, earlier on, I was just reflecting that our society now, with regards to dreadlocks, is at that place where there's wide acceptance of it. You can recall days gone, it was not accepted. So as the education system, we can't go way too far, in front of the society. We have to bring the society along with us. Yes, we're the education sector. We have to open minds, and that's what we'll do. But I believe we have to also respect where the society is in its thinking.
Hear you on that. We are at the point where we're going to take a break here on Lead Story. So the Court of Appeal saying dreadlocks can be worn to school by a child. Important, and this is very important, the issue and the court matter had nothing to do with Rastafari, because that was never cited as the child's religion. It was just about the way the child wore her hair to school in locks. That was what the court was asked to decide, not a religious issue at all, having nothing to do with the fact of Rastafari. Much more on Lead Story with the Education and Youth Minister after these.
The time by Grace. Taste that moves you is
6:45.
Welcome back to Lead Story on CVM TV. We're talking here with the Minister of Education and Youth, Favour Williams, who is here. And, you know, it's funny that we're talking about this issue, Minister, about consequent upon the ruling of the Court of Appeal in the case of ZV, the child who was admitted to Kensington Primary in St. Catherine, but then told that she couldn't take up a place unless she cut her dreadlocks. Parents went to court, lost at the Supreme Court, but won at the Court of Appeal. Funny we're talking about this now, because in my time as a primary school student, there were several boys in my school who had dreadlocks, but they were covered and they had to cover it. In high school, it was the same thing. There were a couple sons of famous reggae artists who had locks, but they had to cover it. As you've said, we've inched towards the progression point little by little by little, because now the covering is not required as per policy.
You cannot require a child to wear a tam to school if that child has dreadlocks.
Yes.
And in our system, as I go around, there are students currently who come to school with dreadlocks.
Yes.
And they're fine.
Yes.
They're doing well.
Yes. So again, that comes back to the point we raised in the first segment, whereby it is certain school principals, certain individuals who themselves have certain values, and you can't knock an individual with a developed value system over decades that they grew up in, that served them well, that served students who were under their charge very well, from maintaining the same value system. But it is now for the ministry to finesse them to the point where they can accept that a student with locks out is no threat to the school society or the school community, and it's not an impediment to learning.
Exactly, exactly. And in the student dress and grooming policy that will be distributed, again, we're saying to schools, this is the framework under which when you develop your individual school policy, it has to fit into that in terms of equity and all those other great values that we want to see.
Yes.
And when we look at your policy, which has to be written, you have to have gone through consultation with your various stakeholders, parents, students, teachers, and so on, and come to an agreement about what it is. And we're hoping by going through that process that you you come to that agreement that all stakeholders will abide by that. Whereas before now, schools were not required to necessarily have a written dress and grooming policy. They will be required to have that. Now, they will be required to go through the consultation process with the stakeholders now, rather than it being an edict from the principal.
Yeah.
Right? So we're opening it up to it being more transparent and for there to be broader agreement among the various stakeholders.
During the Brexit debate in the UK some years ago, when Boris Johnson had his hand on the wheel of government, there was much debate over a surrender bill clause in the whole negotiations to get out of the EU. People were saying Britain was surrendering. I say that to ask if the policy, as you and your team at the ministry will refine it, consequent upon this Court of Appeal ruling, if this policy now could credibly be called a surrender policy where the ministry is surrendering standards, surrendering traditional values, surrendering the way that children have traditionally been raised and groomed in the confines of the school, surrendering it to the whims and fancies of people who want anything to go in schools?
Absolutely not. It's not a surrender. It's more, well, let me contrast what exists with what we envision. What exists currently is that different schools have different policies. There's no overarching framework against which they could judge whether their policy was in line or not.
Yes.
We're going to an environment in which there will be a national framework for schools, and what that means is if a parent or a child feels that they that they have been unfairly treated, then we have this document against which we can measure that.
Yes.
So it's going to be, I think, a less draconian environment, maybe.
Yes.
Less personal environment, meaning the edict that comes down from the principal, who might have been there for a long time, to more an inclusive environment where all the stakeholders have a chance to give input into the process.
Hear you on that. The ministry has a trend initiative going, transforming education for national development. You've had some meetings recently. What's the update on that you want to give to the country?
Okay. Oh, sure. ETOC, which is the oversight committee, met and reported to the nation, as is required to do on a quarterly basis, to say exactly where we are in the process, what have we done, what have we achieved. And we try to measure it as best as we can to give a sense, percentage term, percentage completion on the different pillars. We have 7 pillars of transformation, as you know: the early childhood sector, teacher training, the curriculum. We have TVET, we have the financing of education, infrastructure and technology, governance, and so on. So on each pillar, we try to give the nation a sense of what is it that we've accomplished on the different pillars. So for example, I'm going to take my favorite one, infrastructure and technology.
Yes.
Big pillar. Every single school in Jamaica before Hurricane Beryl needed some work. Any school you walk into, you could see that it needs to be brought up to the 21st century.
Even Campion?
Yes, absolutely, to the 21st century in terms of labs, just the look and feel, and so on. Technology, it calls for us to enable every school with technology. And we are down the path on that, down the wicket on that, in terms of enabling teachers with laptops across primary schools, across high schools, ensuring that the computer labs or technology labs,
putting good Wi-Fi in all schools?
Yes, putting good Wi-Fi in all schools. Just recently, before the hurricane, I was at Beth Habra Primary School, way up in the hills in Manchester, and they had proper Wi-Fi. You walk in and on your phone, you know, sometimes when you're driving around and going around, you go to your phone, you have no connection. As soon as I walked into the gate of Beth Habra and, you know, went to my phone, I could see the 3 portals. One was for staff, one was for students, and one was for guests, and I could log on to their the MOEY guests, and boom.
So trend is moving.
Yes, it's moving
in the right
direction.
trend. Yeah.
On that and the other pillars as well.
You've announced that the burial bill is rising. It's 2.6 and counting, and the number of schools damaged almost 300.
Yeah.
What's
297 as of yesterday.
Yes.
We meet tomorrow. I think on the program this morning. I said this morning, but we meet tomorrow again with the building team. Where they should have a more refined summary for us. We are executing under the emergency procurement, so it's direct contracting, especially for those schools that we prioritize as being schools that we must work on in order for the school to be open in September. And for those in that priority group, I think we're up to 85 priority 1 schools that we must work on. The others, 100 in priority 2, work can happen while school is in session. Priority 3, lesser damage, schools can open and while we're fixing as well. So we want to start running really fast with these 85 schools or more, as they go around and do their assessment, for us to get those schools back up and running as quickly as possible.
We're almost out of time. Quickly, is there the money, is there the cash to do the care that's necessary in the schools?
We're starting with what we have.
Yes.
Obviously, all of this is being rolled up to the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service because it's not just the education
Nigel gets the
sector.
invoices.
So there's a real requirement for us to get more, but we're starting with what we have in terms of what we are able to reallocate from other projects that may not need the funding right away to just get these emergency repairs done.
Hear you on that. Just before we finish the show this evening, I want to turn to Nana Williams and to paraphrase a song, the only Christopher we admire, forget Columbus, Williams and Wallace. And Williams is with us this evening because the news coming out of the Jamaica Stock Exchange is that the long-standing CEO of Proven Management Limited, Chris Williams, is retiring. Chris Williams is only a young man, and we hear that he'll maintain his shareholdings. Look at him. Chris, why are you retiring from Proven? Are you well?
I'm well. Thank you, George. I'm well. I think I'm well.
So why are you going?
I'm not leaving Proven. Let me start with that. Not leaving Proven, where the team is still intact. Everybody is still clumping at the bit to push the team forward. But as a baller yourself, you understand that sometimes you have to shift the team up and you play a different role, and so that's essentially what I'm doing. I'm coming out of the day-to-day operation, going into office, signing the check, balancing the book, all of that, day-to-day stuff, and just operating more at a strategic level, helping to continue to drive the business, to satisfy our clients and our shareholders. So still 150% Proven, not exiting, not leaving, just shifting from an executive role, a day-to-day operating role, and moving to a more strategic role.
So Chris, one of the ways to interpret this is that